Welcome to BeerNet Radio. Listen to on every continent except Antarctica. BeerNet Radio.
Are we allowed to curse on this pod?
Yes, we are. We're encouraged.
Oh, good. Good. Okay, there we go. I was like, hey, are you hopping on? He's probably like, geez.
Late as usual. There he is. The guy that comes for a long time, but doesn't come for a good time. So you went, am I here to believe that you went to this Ole Miss game?
You are.
And they won.
They won 42-0.
Are you aware of this bar in Austin that all the Ole Miss people hang out in for games called WTF, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot?
I am not.
Well, now you are. So next time they play, you and I are going to drive to Austin. We're grabbing gin. We're going to grab a bag of dongles, and we're going to go to this WTF bar and watch a game.
That
Let's
is
do it.
a deal for sure. Hilarity will ensue. Right. Speaking of hilarity, Harry, I have a question for you. What was your childhood nickname? Because Jordan, Bianca, and I have a game tight slew of nicknames that we can use when we got to be like sleuthers. We'll give them these names instead of our real names. What was yours, Harry? Let's see if it fits.
In high school, everybody called me Harry Ballsack, which was very uncool, I thought.
Okay, so that wasn't a family given nickname.
No, it's my ball sack is neither hairy nor not hairy. It's the normal amount of hairy. So I felt like it was not only rude, but it was inaccurate. But they called me Harry Polari. So Polari was a big one. That's what my grandfather called me.
I'm confused. Is Polari a real word? Or is that just a rhyme scheme?
Is Harry like frozen? I think he's frozen.
I don't know what happened, but
you were deep in thought.
But yeah, Jordan, it's just it just rhymes. We're not very sophisticated in this family. We just make things that rhyme. Harry Polari and Harry Ballsack.
Which doesn't rhyme, but you know.
It doesn't rhyme and it doesn't make any sense. I still ponder why I was named that, but it stuck. Like people to this day, I'll be walking down the street. Hey, Ballsack. And I know that that's one of my high school colleagues. Humiliating. All right, so let's let Paul in. Welcome, everybody, to BeerNet Radio. My name is Harry Schuhmacher, the podcast where all your dreams come true. This is, we have Jen Litz-Kirk and Jordan Driggers also on the line as our editors. And we have the great folks from Liquid Opportunities. And Jen, I'll let you introduce our guests.
Yeah, so I have quite the illustrious background for Jason. Liquid Opportunities Chief, you were former president of the Mark Anthony Group out of Canada and one of the key creators of Mike's Hard Lemonade. You grew up in Modesto, California, where you cut your teeth in the industry as a member of the Bartles and James launch team. And since then, managed and owned beer distributors and created dozens of products in the RTD category and affectionately known as the grandfather of RTDs. Now, Jason, I got to ask, who gave you that nickname?
I think Paul did. That was his rib at me just being old. Thanks, Paul.
Grandfather? You don't look a day over an old uncle, maybe a crazy uncle. Yeah, you're welcome. That's what I do.
I could look related.
No doubt.
Well, so tell me, Jason, besides having helped create Mike's Hard, what other greatest hit RTDs have you had a hand in?
Yeah. So just the background to your point. I grew up Modesto. And so the biggest employer when I was growing up was the Gallo winery. So at 15, I got my first job there out of all places in the mailroom. So that was my job. I was delivering internally. The post office delivered the big sacks of mail. We'd have to go in and distribute it to all the offices, right? And so it was a pretty big deal because you got to go to a place called the Temple. And the reason the admin building was called the Temple is because they referred to Ernest and Julio as gods. And so you got to go to
and you know what? They are very close.
They are. Exact. God rest their soul.
Yeah.
And so they called this place the Temple. And so I got to go in there all the time. And, you're making deliveries to people's office. You get to see all these cool bottles and these things people are working on. And it was a great environment, great atmosphere. So After school, went to work for Gallo, and my first foray into RTD was really one of the first, formal RTDs, and that's Bartles and James, right? So Cal Cooler,
Sure.
and I call it the wine cooler corridor. Cal Cooler was in Stockton, California. That's where they launched. Two guys, Mike Creed and Stu Bewley, who
Yeah.
were one of them worked at a beer distributor, the Coors distributor there, and one of them worked at a Macy's. It's a department store there. And so they came up with Cal Cooler. It was their punch recipe, their own home recipe. And they launched that 83, 84. And then I was working full-time for Gallo in 84. And in the summer of 85, down in Los Angeles, I got the job of being in charge of the project of launching it in Southern California. And
Wow.
so here we were.
Can I break
Yeah.
in here, because this is
Yeah.
I didn't know this story before we started, and for those listening at home, California Cooler was, I mean, what you're kind of getting at was really the first RTD, and
Yes.
it took the country by storm. My father was a struggling beer wholesaler in Houston. He had all the cats and dog brands. California Cooler saved him.
Oh.
He was about to go bankrupt. So go ahead with your story. It's very interesting, and how
Yeah.
this
Harry, to
progressed.
that point, I mean, these were one of them worked at, I believe it was Mike, worked at the distributor, and it was a Coors distributor owned by Bob Garibaldi. Was a big athlete, and Jim Plunkett, the former Heisman Trophy winner in the football world. And they owned this small little beer distributor in Stockton, and that was their first distributor. And the thing took off from there, as Harry's alluding to, all over the country. And it was the biggest thing we had ever seen out of any, these types of beverages. It was the first one, the category maker, right? And so,
Right.
needless to say, Gallo, and Paul can attest to this because Paul was a Gallo devotee, and had worked for Gallo early in his career also, in that Gallo wasn't going to stand on the sidelines and watch this volume just happen. So we launched the Bartles and James brand in the summer of 85. And it was such a priority. They went in, and Gallo had a real big presence down in Southern California. They controlled all the chains. They had an unbelievable relationship with all the big chain buyers. They had a separate chain division to go along with their general market, independent liquor store division, and then an on-premise division. And so Gallo, we put this whole program together. We launched it in LA, and immediately it just took off. Now, it was supported by TV. So if you recall, they had Ed and Frank, right? Bartles and James, and they were these two country farmers, older guys, right? They wore the overalls, something like Harry and I would wear on the weekends. And they were the mouthpieces. They were two actors, and it was their brand. And they ran TV. They were one of the few brands on TV at that point that wasn't Budweiser or Miller. And so this thing just took off. And I remember one of our stealth guerrilla plans to really make sure this brand had a presence at retails was we gave every employee at the LA Gallo Wine Company distributor, it was owned by Gallo, every employee, whether they worked in the office, whether they were sales management, whether they drove a truck, everybody got a list of 25 stores in and around their home. And their job was to get on weekends and go fill the cold box, because the velocity was something like we had never seen, because prior to that we're selling table wines, right? And different varieties of wines, champagne, Andre Champagne, E&J brandy. So this thing went ballistic, and the rest is history. I mean, to this day, both those brands, Cal Cooler is out there, especially for example, in Canada, it's out there, and it's in some markets. You see remnants of it here, but it's actively marketed in Canada and in other international markets. And Bartles and James, you see, they've now pivoted Bartles and James to make it more relevant. So, but these were million case brands. And then Seagram's had to get in on the action within about a year and a half later. And Paul and I's careers kind of followed each other from Gallo then to Seagram's, where Seagram's, hired Bruce Willis, who you may or not remember from all the Die Hard movies. Sure. This was back when he was a suave TV actor on a hit show, Moonlighting or something of that nature.
Yeah, Moonlighting. I remember that show.
Sybil Shepherd was
his
co-host. She was the I don't know what you would call her of our day, but, you know, a very attractive, famous actress. And together they did this, sexual tension humor type show. And, he was the pitch man, and that became a big, huge brand. And you now see that brand still, I mean, all these years later, we're talking early 80s. You now see them in 2022. You see Seagram's Escapes, which are a malt product now out there. And
Right.
so that's how the whole real RTD category started, with these products. And, these brands were doing at the time. I mean, I remember Seagram's Coolers was doing 19 million cases, in the latter mid to late 80s. I mean, it was big volume back then. They had these numbers, they were surpassing numbers that we had never seen before in non-beer domestic beer, right? And imported beer, the big brands. And, the micro craft beer category had not started yet. It was on the tail end of the mid to later part of the 80s. And so it's the biggest thing we'd ever seen. And to your point, a lot of distributors got healthy and happy on this category.
The
right?
margins were high, and
Margins were high.
it was incremental to beer, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Well, and this is a little off topic, but why do so many valued and talented executives come out of Gallo? Like, I know they're kind of considered really good at training, but can you, like, what is it about Gallo in particular that produces so many later entrepreneurs that are successful?
Yeah, I think they provide a platform usually out of college. So many of the people who work for Gallo, if you talk to them, they work for Gallo very at an early point in their career. And training, there are a lot of big Fortune 500 companies that train well, but Gallo really, got you out of school, gave you really protocols that you can use for the rest of your life, for the rest of your career. And again, ingrained in you the strong work ethic, the organization, the follow-up, all those little things that work for any industry, any career opportunities. And they were very competitive. I think, basically, if you look at the people that they hired athletes. They hired people who basically were ingrained in a competitive culture growing up. And, those are things that you just don't let go, later in your career.
Yeah.
Interesting.
When you went to work for Gallo, it was like joining an army, so to speak, right? And you were up at 4 a.m., you were in your accounts 5 a.m., and you were working, till 7, 8 at night, and you were working on Saturdays. And so, because the whole mantra was, we're the leaders, we're the category leaders in every category we're in. And it's all about detail at retail. So it was simplistic, the message and the marching orders, but it was all about excellence. And you wouldn't they invented merchandising, right? What we know nowadays is merchandising that we all sometimes take for granted, but detail at retail, the 10 steps to a sales call. If it's not cold, it's not sold, right? All these
just blocking and tackling, really.
Exactly.
It hadn't changed in 30 years, but we always try and invent things that'll take its place, but nothing really does effectively.
Exactly. And that's,
I've taken everybody. I've taken. We're off track. I've down a rabbit hole, because I could talk about history for all day long. So tell me what you're doing now, and Jen, you can lead that discussion. But because I have a taco here that I'm gonna eat, so I'm gonna listen to you guys' brilliance while I eat my taco, if that's all right.
Oh, thank God. Okay. Exactly to that point, 40 years later at Liquid Opportunities, what do you offer, right? How many CEs do you do? Because you said, you guys are a sizable business right now in the RTD world.
Well, what we've tried to do is, this came out of obviously our experiences, but what we went through, when I went up to Mark Anthony Brands in the mid 90s and we launched Mike's, and Mark Anthony was really a Liquid Opportunities, right? They were a sales agency that had marketing. They did trade marketing. They had a national sales team, and they had brands from all over the world. And, some of the brands, they had the Stroh's brands for Western Canada. They had, many people don't know this, but we had the Barton or the Modelo brands for Western Canada. We were the counterpart to Barton in the United States before it became Crown. Yeah,
I'd forgotten that. That's right. They were importing Corona up in Canada.
exactly.
And I forgot they were a sales agency because we just think of White Claw and Mike's.
No.
But yeah, they represented a lot of brands up there.
A lot of brands. I mean, Anthony Von Mandel, who was my boss, still the chairman and CEO. I mean, he had started the company, umpteen years prior to me coming on board in the mid 90s. And he was a visionary. I mean, he had built this sales agency. He had Behringer, Chateau Saint Michel, Santa Rita, Zonin from Italy. He had wines. He had the Corby Hiram Walker products, the spirits up there. And he had a winery in the Okanagan, which is British Columbia's Napa Valley comparison, and a beautiful winery on a lake there overlooking just beautiful vineyards and just beautiful geography and topography. And to this day, it's a destination. They hold concert venues there. They've had royalty visit them up there. So he had a winery. We did about 2 million cases of cider it was the most kept secret. We had 2 cider brands. They each did about 1 million cases. And then he also developed, his own products. And it started with wines, Mission Hill wines, along with these ciders, and then Mike's Hard Lemonade. And let me tell you, that Mike's Hard Lemonade, it was a funny story. It's a funny story. And it really talks about what's going on even today with the hard seltzers and the RTD spirits. And that is, when we first launched Mike's, it was vodka based. It was vodka based in Canada, like many of the products. And then they moved to malt because of the restrictions on distribution when it comes to the US, but it was vodka based. And we took it into the liquor boards to pitch it because up there, almost every province, you go through liquor boards and they run the distribution and they control the retail stores. In one, you have Alberta where they do have independently owned liquor stores, but in most of the other provinces, it's all done through a liquor board. So we went in and pitched Mike's Hard Lemonade to the British Columbia Liquor Board. And the first thing they said is, look, we've got like 6 other lemon brews, because they had Sun Devil. They had a number of these brands that were Alka-Pops that came from Australia and the UK. And so they said, we don't need another one of these lemon things. And so the first words out of our mouth was, you don't have a hard lemonade. And literally, they were like, looked at us, incredulous look on their face saying, you're right, we don't have a hard lemonade. Lo and behold, the rest is history, The brand took off. It took off at first. It was kind of an outside in. It took off first in Ontario, especially at the nightclub scene. And then it got into the LCBO liquor stores where it just blew up and worked its way back across Canada, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Alberta, and in British Columbia. And after we did about 5 million cases of Mike's in, I think it was 99, 98, we decided to bring it down to the United States. And our first markets was New England. And to your point, Harry, we still doing 5 million cases in Canada. We couldn't get all the big guys that excited about the brand. They were just so like, we've heard it all before. It sells there. It might not sell here. So we picked, I'll never forget the trips down, because we were out of Vancouver. That's where our headquarters were. And we found 3 independent distributors. We found Bill Burke, which is Burke Distributing out of Mass, great family-owned business, number of generations. Jim Stack, who was Franklin Distributing, now he's Hartford, Budweiser in Hartford, and Kenny Mancini. And those were our first 3, along with Merrimack Distributing and Colonial on the Cape there, all family-run, family-operated businesses. And in order to get them to all come on, we took them up to Canada and showed them what the presence of Mike's was in the LCBO. And they walked in these stores and we had displays to the ceiling, 100, 200 cases. You just didn't see that in government liquor stores.
Right.
And they finally said, we'll take you on. And I was so excited. All right, we got these distributors. Here we go. Mass, Connecticut, Rhode Island, waiting by the fax machine. If that doesn't date me. And here came the PO from all 3 of them, 1,500 cases.
Oh shit!
Wait a minute.
It's not even a trailer.
Exactly. It's like 1,500 cases. Are you kidding me? We do 5 million, didn't they? I guess we didn't show them enough, but the rest is history, because that
Yeah.
1,500 cases came in, and we saw it from day one. The salespeople, after, we did a crew drive. We brought some of our people down from Canada to work the market. We rewarded them with the trip down there. And let me tell you, by the time the first couple of days, you'd get back to the barn, right, the distributor in the afternoon, and
Yep.
people would be calling, where can I get it? It's sold out. My wife has sent me to find it. I've looked at 10 liquor stores. Where's it going to be? And the rest is history. The thing just blossomed. And so it had a great start. And, we've all seen how brilliant Anthony is, bringing White Claw, umpteen years later, to that distribution system and doing all the great things. So just fast forward, how I got into this business was I came back to the States in the early 2000s, and I started creating my own brands. And the first one I created was a brand called Glacier Bay. And it was a vodka refreshment beverage. It was one of the only ones, vodka and juice. And it did phenomenal. My co-packer was a guy by the name of Fred Franzia. God rest his soul.
Oh, yeah. I was sorry to see
Yeah.
about what happened to Fred, but
He just passed away, but he was our first co-packer, and the brand did phenomenal. It was great. And so that started us on about a 12-year run into the 2010, 11, 12 of creating RTD brands. And so we started creating, we did the first vodka one, which is Glacier Bay. We did a cognac and vodka brand called Truce. The Truce named after the French, the French and Russian War, right? And we just started creating these RTDs. And so we got to the point in about 2012 where we had some exits with private equity on some of these brands where we sold. And I had to start, and I had some non-competes. And so what happened was we started consulting, and then we started this company in 2015. And the premise of Liquid Opportunities was started to help people create their own brands, focusing on RTDs. So that's how we started. And after a couple of years, people would come back and say, wow, we've got this great brand. Thank you. It tastes great, looks good. Positionings we think is right on, but it's harder than heck to get distributors. And so in comes circa the last few years, we started a sales agency. Paul's came over to head it up as the vice president of sales. And what we do now is we have region managers across the country. In every region, we have a national accounts director, we have a marketing director. And what we are is, the sales agency that are helping people get their brands to market and grow them, and give them some insight on how to position the brands and then support it. And a lot of it, our clients are entrepreneurs. We have some small companies. We've had bigger companies internationally come over. So that's what we do. And, we focus, if you look at our portfolio, it's RTD focused. And so that's where we spend our time. And, it's funny thing about the industry. Here it is all these years later from the early 80s when RTDs as we know them started. And it's still such a great business. The beautiful thing about this industry is it's still family, right? It's still, whether you're talking some of the bigger entities like a Sheehan or Reyes, right? But or you're talking about independents like Berkshire or Brown Bag in San Diego. It spans the realm of size, but it's still that family relationship driven industry. And business. It's still a great place to be. So we're enjoying it. We're having fun.
So getting distribution, as you say, is the hardest because you have to gain. It's hard to break into. You got to gain their trust, and so if I'm understanding, you already have that structure set up across the country. And if let's just say I'm coming out with Harry's hop tea, Hooper's Hooch, Harry's Hooper's Hooch.
Yeah,
We're going to bring it back from
Phase
Australia.
2. Yeah.
And remember Hooper's Hooch?
Oh, that was one of those lemon brews.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And,
It's hard bubbles, Harry.
Hard
God.
bubbles, right.
Hard bubbles.
We have a brand for you, Jason. We'll talk later.
Okay.
That's
Right
hard
after
bubbles.
this. I love it.
They got a picture of me compromising. Anyway, we don't want to talk about. So if I
You don't want to
come
see
up,
it either, probably.
yeah, you don't.
Not just talking about it.
But if I came up, I'd come to you guys and I'd say, look, I want to be in these, 15 states, probably in this region. Can you help me? And help me ramp up, and then after I've launched, kind of maintain? Is that
Yeah, manage the day to day and expand the, that's exactly the formula. Pick a region where there's some inherent following or strength of the new brand, right? Whether it's your hometown, whether you've spent time in the industry in that neck of the woods, build out the region, right? With wholesalers, be professional, be putting together programming and initiatives, whether it's social media, PR, et cetera, all the things. And then after you get the distribution and you're starting to build your brand in the marketplace, start figuring out what are the targets for the larger format clients. And obviously we know in some markets, are more independent accounts like the New England versus, a California, Florida, Texas, where it's chain driven. At least,
right?
California and Florida, huge chain markets. And so, once we build a brand, we move to a region and expand. And if it's a chain region, then we, as we start to make those moves, we start calling on those bigger clients, those bigger national accounts, key accounts, regional accounts, and developing the brand. But yeah, that's really it. Start from a platform of local, whatever that local may be mean to the brand and the brand owner and the potential consumers, and then go from there. And so, and I think another thing about what's going on, there's so much creativity now that we've never seen so many different offshoots of RTDs. I mean, it's the rapid pace of how people are pivoting. 2 years ago we were sitting here marveling at the hard seltzer space, right? And it quickly did what a lot of categories do. It expands to hundreds of offerings, and then it kind of constricts and contracts to a number of the bigger players. We've seen that craft a little bit too, in a number of other categories. But people are pivoting every day. You should see the items and brands that come to us that say, wow, I got an idea. And we think we have if you ever looked at our portfolio on our site, we think we have a pretty nice mix of products. We have some very interesting things that are doing really well. And, I think we offer wholesalers something different, and unique and innovative, which I think nowadays, wholesalers are looking for incremental business, not a me too. You only need so many Chardonnays if you're selling wine, or you only need so many RTD spirits or hard seltzers.
Right. How do you choose who to work with, and is there any commonality, or is it just if you think it's a good product?
Well, we're much like a distributor. We like to think that we're like the one-stop shop for a distributor. We offer spirit RTDs, wine-based, malt-based, non-alcoholic, specialty beverages. So when we go to a distributor, we try to offer them something they don't currently have, or they have limited offerings. And it's no different when a brand comes to us and says, hey, we would like you to represent us. We look at that, their offering, and does it fit well? Does it play well with others, right? If we already have a couple of tequila offerings, do we want to bring on a third or a fourth? Maybe not, right? We want to be, we want to offer something for everybody, but not overplay any one category. I mean, inevitably, you're going to have maybe one or two of, a vodka based, or one or two of a hard seltzer, right? Because there's not just one brand of car or one brand of shoes. But that's how we kind of look at it. We want to make sure our current brand owners are happy, because honestly, the better our mix of brands, the stronger we are for all of our brand owners. Because if, for example, if we couldn't get into a big distributor because they said, hey, we have way too many hard seltzers. Well, because we offer, say, a tequila quencher, now we're in, right? Now we have a relationship with a big distributor that we can offer our other brands down the line. So we become more valuable as a supplier that way.
I was going to say, are people coming to you with RTDs? Is it more in the better for you category, or is it more full flavor now?
Both. Yeah, that's exactly. You're seeing both. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people coming to us for beverages, they're tasting what's out there, right? And they're hearing the comments by their circle of friends and by others, and that full flavor cycle is on full display. right, of what's coming out now. And then you hit on it, the functional aspect of how, and there's only so much you can do, right? We are, the TTB is governing and FDA, but you're seeing a number of functional beverage ideas starting to pop up. And we have actually one of those, and it's a brand that we're targeting golf courses with and golfers with it, because to get people to keep their edge, right? So but you are in both those, Jordan. You're seeing a lot of people coming to us with those
Gotcha.
concepts.
And going back to distribution, I guess a consulting question for you. If you're a spirits-based RTD brand, is it a must to hit markets that allow for spirits and grocery, or can you succeed in markets that, only allow for the sound liquor stores?
That's a great question. I think the thing is, and to get into grocery, and we're talking, if our definition of grocery for the sake of this conversation is a good sized chain, whether it be like a Winn-Dixie, Harris Tweeter, the list goes on and on. Maybe it's not a Meijer or a Kroger yet. It usually takes a track record to get you in there for the most part. So sometimes, our strategy is, let's go to a market that's liquor store driven, and let's really, where a distributor sales force can sink their teeth into it and really build that brand, deal with that retailer every day, that decision maker. And so that's one of the things that it's definitely a proving ground, right? And if you can get the results and get the distribution and get the sales throughput and the velocity, you can take those numbers to a chain and say, look, we want to extend, this is our 12-month rolling, et cetera, et cetera. Can you consider us for submission and inclusion in your set? So I don't think, obviously, sometimes you get a chain buyer that right off the bat, a brand resonates with them, and maybe they give you a test or a certain part of their footprint. But there's nothing wrong with taking a brand to an independent market and saying, hey, that distributor, we motivate the distributor, we work hand in hand with them. Let's rock and roll this thing today and get some penetration and traction in the market. The chains, we can always take these numbers when we, and keep presenting them to the chains, for that opportunity to get in front of those people.
See that, and I would think that's the value that you guys bring, because that takes experience. If I were a new entrepreneur coming into this business, I wouldn't know that. I wouldn't know that New Jersey is not a chain market, right? Or Massachusetts is not a chain market, but Florida is. So if your product would do well in a Publix versus a liquor store, or what, like you said, test it in a market where there isn't a Publix, so you don't have to even try that.
No,
the market by market thing is interesting, because I think a mistake a lot of marketers get in this business is that they consider the United States a market, and it's not a market. It's not even 50 markets. It's really, 100 markets, and each state has its own set of laws, which dictates its account base and how channels are set up. So it really is, you got to know each market individually to be able to strategically plan for it. This is the part of the podcast where I stand up and make speeches, and everybody has to sit and listen to them.
This part? It's this part? Oh, I'm sorry.
It's funny you brought that up, Harry, because you don't know how many people, their first part of our first conversations and interviews with people, it's, I want to be in California and Florida. Well, guess what? Everybody wants to be there. But those are chain driven markets. So what are you really doing to your brand if you happen to get a distributor in those markets? You're going to be compared to other brands in that distributor's portfolio that might have already chain authorizations and access. So you're not doing your brand any good, because they're just going to compare velocity at the end of the day. And the distributor's going to say, you're not selling what such and such brand sells. You might get rationalized, because everybody wants those markets. So to your point, a sale is a sale. If you can prove you get traction in your example, New Jersey, which is a liquor store market, or Massachusetts, there's a number of them, that translates. Retail buyers go, look, hey, if consumers are following you and buying you in New Jersey, they might follow and buying you in Illinois, which has chains, or Michigan, which has chains.
Right. It's very interesting, because you also have to kind of work the scan data. And a lot of times, not a lot of times, but sometimes there are really successful brands, but they just don't show up in scan data, so they don't get the recognition maybe that they deserve because they're in a lot of independents, or you know, they're in certain markets that don't scan as much, and so you gotta have to play that scan data game, right? Where you want to, you know, at least show up. It can be tough. So, all right, well, listen, we try and keep these to 30 minutes, and we're already over because I love talking. This is fascinating to me. We'd like to have you back, both you guys, because I like talking about old times, and I like putting things in perspective because the context is important. And I think there's there's a lot of out there right now. People have false expectations of what they're gonna, they see something that went national and did well, and they think that everybody can do that. And you could be very successful in a region. I mean, look at Carlos Alvarez. I mean, he bitches and complains that he doesn't have Corona anymore, but look, Shiner's like the number 4 or 5 craft brewer in the country, and 90% of their sales are in one state, Texas. Or, you know, you go up to Wisconsin and you have that crazy there. What's her name?
Harry. Jesus.
I didn't mean, no, she's wonderful. And listen, she's built an incredible business in one state.
We hear it all the time. People equate success in this industry, how many states you're in, how many distributors, when if we could just saturate 1 or 2 markets, your volume in those markets might do what the next 6 or 7 states would do. It's just
deep or wide. You got to go
Exactly.
deep or wide, and you kind of have to massage that. Well, anyway, we've kept you guys too long, but thanks for coming on, both of you gentlemen. Liquid Opportunities, look it up online. We'll put a link right here, and we'll Jen, who do we have coming up on our next podcast? You're really good at plugging, so I wanted to leave it to you.
We have Chris Stefanci. Am I saying his last name right?
It's either Stefanci.
Stefanci or Stefanci, one of those, who is wonderful and has a fast-growing distributorship that is dominating the Pac Northwest, of course. And then we have Island Brands as well. So stay tuned.
Great. What's Chris's distributor?
That's
Jen?
Columbia.
Columbia, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Looks like Columbia is picking up
Scout.
Scout.
Well, JV with Scout in Idaho.
Yeah. And it looks like Constellation in some of the parts of the state that he doesn't have it in Washington.
Yeah, no, he's one of those. I'm really excited to have him on because he's very candid, but they're also one of those large distributors who's not afraid to try something completely new, you know?
Yeah.
Like another wholesaler wouldn't touch it, but Chris is like, well, let's do this differently. Like case in point, doing a JV with a tiny outfit like Scout in a completely new market, right? So
yeah, or dry coffee. You know,
Or-
I was like, why are you selling dry coffee? Anyway, another subject.
I'm intrigued.
Awesome.
Well, guys, thank you for
Well, thanks for
drinking
having us,
beer
Harry.
and RTDs, and great to hear about your success. And hey, we'll shout at you in another 6 months. See how you're doing.
Awesome.
Great. Thanks very much.
Gordon.
Cheers.
Ken, thank
Take
you.
care. Bye bye.
Bye, guys.